What sounds like complete nonsense but has been proven to be true? That strongly imagining and envisioning doing an activity in detail actually stimulates the same regions in your brain and actually improves your performance in it as if you're actually doing it for real, or at least similarly. I don't remember exact details. I've tried it with singing specifically, and I definitely feel the same sensations in my throat and vocal cords, or at least strong phantom sensations, as when I'm actually doing the actual vocal exercises. I feel the strong imagination with details definitely improves your understanding of the activity itself, and therefore ability, because you have to understand each component so deeply, similar to how teaching is the best way to learn. Disclaimer, I haven't actually read the article I linked because I learned it from a different source, but I heard that even just imagining lifting weights helps stimulate and strengthen your muscles the way it would as if you were actually exercising. Apparently it's used a lot in sports. It's extremely handy and I love it. Now I wish I just did it more, lol. I wonder if this effect doesn't exist for people who have no ability to see things in their mind or for people who have no inner monologue. Story 2. We have little crystals in our inner ear. If they get out of place, it can upset your sense of balance. It's sometimes possible to get them back into place by moving your head a certain way. I'm a speech pathologist. I studied audiology and the anatomy of speech and hearing mechanisms, but that was over 25 years ago, and I never heard about these crystals. Apparently they were discovered before that time, so I don't know why we were never taught about them. My mom told me the doctor had her move her head to get her crystals back in place, and I thought it was a total hoax until I looked it up. Story 3. The French Secret Service placed a limpet mine on a Greenpeace ship and sank it to stop it from protesting French nuclear testing in the Pacific. They were so incompetent that 2 were caught within days and the others only just managed to escape via submarine after sinking their yacht. Using trade, the French government then blackmailed the New Zealand government into releasing the captives. England, New Zealand's founder, refused to support them, and then the USA turned against New Zealand because of its no-nuke stance. All this drove New Zealand to adopt an independent foreign policy so they no longer automatically follow anybody else's lead. So much for relying on your friends and allies. History is now repeating itself with the US giving the finger to the whole world except former enemies. Story 4. A lot of old sayings and stories are real. A clear day after a storm means another day of storming. A red sky at night, fishers delight. Red sky in morning, sailors take warning. Air pressure, if I recall. And clothes for toothache. Plus, many stories are based on morals and phenomena. The wild hunt often punishes those who don't lock their doors or close their windows. The ancient Egyptian calendar had 5 special days said to be the birthday of gods because of how the calendar drifted out of sync over decades. Modern medicine and meteorology are obviously orders of magnitude more accurate, but people without our technology still figured out a lot. They had to, and they did. Also, Arctic just means bear, and Antarctica means opposite of the bear, referring to Ursa Major and Minor. Story 5. Monty Hall shows you 3 curtains and asks you to pick one. Behind one is a prize, the other 2 have goats. You pick one. Monty then shows you one of the curtains you didn't pick with a goat behind it. He then says, do you want to keep the curtain you picked or switch to the remaining unknown curtain? What should you do? Turns out, if you switch, your odds of winning are 2 to 3. You'll win twice as often. You should always switch. This puzzle fooled mathematics PhDs when it first came out. It seems like all curtains, regardless of what Monty does, should be 1 out of 3. Or maybe when Monty shows you what's behind one curtain, the 2 unknown curtains should be 50-50 now. 2 curtains, 2 unknowns, but it's not true. Story 6. One of my favorite mathematics puzzles. A group of 100 prisoners are assigned numbers 1 through 100 and are led to a room. In the room are 100 boxes numbered 1 through 100, and the prisoners' numbers are randomly distributed in the 100 boxes. For example, box 72 has number 48 in it, and so on. The prisoners are told that if every prisoner can find their number, they can go free. However, each prisoner can only open at most 50 boxes, and once they open all 50, they are led out of the room and can't convey any information to the other prisoners. The prisoners can strategize ahead of time but can't communicate to one another during each prisoner's search. Given these conditions, what are the maximum odds that the prisoners have of going free? The unintuitive answer: with the right strategy, there is a 1 in 3 chance of them going free. That's wildly unintuitive and absolutely does not seem like it should be possible, but it is the best case scenario. Story 7. Peptic ulcers are caused by bacteria and not stress or diet. Today, it's hard to imagine what a given it was that an aching peptic ulcer was completely assumed to be caused by stress and diet. But a doc in the early 80s, I think, realized it was likely bacteria. In fact, I remember right, he drank a big old concoction of bacteria-infused liquid, and lo and behold, he got an ulcer. Dude eventually won a Nobel Prize. He also completely decimated the market for Tagamet, the most widely prescribed medicine in the world. The manufacturer has the golden cow, a medicine needed to treat ulcer symptoms forever. Suddenly, now there's a cure and there's no need for the ongoing treatment. Story 8. The Banach-Tarski Paradox. It's a theorem in mathematics that goes as follows. Given a solid ball in three-dimensional space, there exists a decomposition of the ball into a finite number of disjoint subsets that can be put back together in a different way to yield two identical copies of the original ball. AKA, you can cut up a P and reassemble it into two copies of the original P for very weird definitions of cut up. There's a nasty technicality. The paradox requires the axiom of choice, which appears obvious but actually is known to be impossible to either prove or disprove. Story 9. Here are a few that sound like complete nonsense to most people in December 2025, but are well established to be true and not fringe. The COVID pandemic never ended, just the cultural event from 2020. The SARS-2 virus never was mild, vaccinated or not, and never became less pathogenic over time. More than 1 in 3 Americans have a chronic long-term condition as a result of a COVID infection, aka long COVID. Reinfection dramatically increases the risk of long COVID. There's no cure for long COVID and it's likely permanent. See the 15-plus year long-term studies of SARS-S1 survivors. Not good. COVID is spread by aerosols that can linger in indoor spaces and be infectious for hours after an infected person has left. High-quality, well-fitted N95 and better masks are excellent at preventing COVID. At-home rapid tests for COVID RATSs are terrible at confirming a person does not have COVID. For 90% accuracy, you must have 2 negative tests taken 48 hours apart. PCR testing is best, but there are some decent at-home tests. Expect to pay $50 to $100 per test. Surely these fun facts sound like nonsense to most people right now, including your doctor who doesn't wear an N95 when they see you. And yet, 400,000 plus peer-reviewed scientific publications over the last 6 years demonstrate long-term cardiometabolic, neurologic, and systemic sequelae following even mild infections. The literature is quite well established and not controversial or fringe. Story 10. The geologic history of Hart Mountain, Wyoming. The rocks in the mountain are almost 300 million years old and the base rocks the mountain rests on. Around 50 million years ago, a sheet of rock 500 square miles in area and 2 to 3 miles thick detached from a plateau and slid to the southeast and south. Despite the slope of underlying land being less than 2 degrees, this enormous block of solid rock traveled at least 25 miles to where it is today. The only explanations for how this rock traveled so far on such a low slope basically involve floating it on a cushion of air like a hovercraft. Either the nearby volcano generated a huge amount of steam or heat from friction caused rock at the bottom to release enormous amounts of carbon dioxide. Story 11. DMT, a substance produced by our bodies at levels similar to serotonin, is being extensively investigated by neuroscientists because it stimulates or allows access to a reality that feels more real and more elegant than our own, one populated by highly intelligent, technologically advanced species and composed of vast, ultra-complex landscapes, cities, and even entire planets, etc. It's not fully understood what the function of DMT is in the body, but it appears to briefly stave off organ damage when an organism lacks oxygen. Many reports of near-death experiences are very similar to the DMT state. Going towards the light is quite literally something that happens to you before you break into the DMT realm, for example. Perhaps NDEs are the result of the body's final attempt to save its organs using a compound which just so happens to produce one of the most shocking psychedelic experiences possible. When suffering, humans and other animals have elevated DMT levels. The DMT realm is described as feeling more real than our normal waking reality. Many people report a sensation of familiarity, that the DMT realm is innate and has always been there, but we couldn't quite put our finger on it until ingesting it. Without trying DMT, which is considered one of the safest psychedelics, avoid if you have heart problems or risk for psychosis, though I can't advocate anyone take a substance based on a Reddit comment. That last part certainly does not make sense, and I get that. Regardless, what is most important to discuss about the DMT realm is the entities. Although in pop culture substances are said to produce hallucinations like a devil or a Cheshire cat as examples, this is not typically the case. Hallucinating a humanoid or otherwise figure would require ingesting massive amounts of those substances, and even then it's not a guarantee. Almost no other psychedelics consistently produce encounters with entities. Further, the entities themselves seem to be independent agents with their own motivations, feelings, memories, friends, jobs, etc. You can see the same entities over and over again when using DMT, even years after your first encounter. Some people even claim to form friendly or romantic relationships with them. No other substances, dream, or psychotic state known to man produces entities which seem to continue to exist even when they are not observed. The DMT realm seems to be continually evolving from one experience to the next. Our dreams aren't one long story which continues each night, for example. They are also staggeringly intelligent. As one example, mathematicians have smoked DMT and describe the entities showing off their intellect by rapidly solving complex math problems which would ordinarily take hours within seconds repeatedly. The entities also seem to be trying to give us technology. They will often present you with a device which is almost impossible to comprehend. Many speculate that these are higher dimensional objects, and they tell you to try and understand how it works. They even try to explain, but the technology or their intellect is so far beyond ours that they can't dumb themselves down to our level. There are multiple types of devices they present to people, and many reports are nearly identical. Interestingly, there may be an actual record of knowledge transfer from the entities to humanity. There's a tribe in the Amazon that uses DMT-containing brews, whose oral history is that the DMT entities taught them about agriculture. I can't remember the tribe's name, but I'm pretty sure the N sounds like mommy. Many people also report that the entities urge humans to increase the amount of time you can stay in the DMT state. 10 to 20 minutes is the typical duration, which has now been made possible. DMT is rapidly used and removed by the body, and it is not known to build a tolerance. Furthermore, it can be injected intravenously. So, like an anesthetic, you can now keep someone in the DMT state for hours at a time. This has resulted in some interesting extended state DMT studies in Europe, where they are literally mapping the DMT realm and trying to learn more about the entities. Will hopefully be published soon, but individual reports have started to trickle out. Imperial College DMTX. This point about not building a tolerance is extremely important. Even though vaporizing or injecting DMT does not build tolerance, you can still be barred from entering the DMT realm. People who use DMT frequently sometimes report that the entities will become very annoyed with them for constantly showing up. This eventually can result in hostility or even being kicked out of the experience. Sometimes getting kicked out coincides with a slap, a punch, or a kick from the entity, instantly launching you back into our waking world. This can occur well before the body should have been able to properly process the substance. What should have been a 15-minute experience turns into 2 minutes. After, people either have no effect from using DMT, or when they enter the realm, they are greeted by a big flashing X and something to the tune of, "You can't come in yet," being said to you or imposed into your view. Others see a big curtain which, when pulled to the side, reveals a small room with an entity sitting in a chair wagging its finger at you, saying, "You can't enter." No other substances are seemingly able to selectively control the tolerance of a user. Usually, this bizarre tolerance goes away after some months of abstinence. It's all extremely interesting, and many aspects of the experience cannot be explained by a current understanding of the brain. Certainly, it's possible that everything you see in the DMT state is a total fabrication of the mind with no outside input, but there are strong arguments against this too, with the main one being, how can your brain be smarter than itself? Think back to the mathematician. There is much more to this that I did not cover. It's an endless rabbit hole. Story 12. Scientists described a previously unrecognized anatomical structure in the human body in 2018. Called the interstitium, it is a network of fluid-filled spaces supported by connective tissue that sits beneath the skin and surrounds organs, muscles, and the digestive tract. These spaces were long thought to be solid tissue. They went unnoticed because standard post-mortem preparation drains the fluid and collapses the structure, making it appear dense after passing. New imaging techniques revealed it in the living tissue. While some researchers argue it functions like an organ and may be among the largest structures by volume, there is no consensus. Many anatomists still classify it as a feature of connective tissue rather than a distinct organ. Story 13. Special relativity, that the way time flows for an observer is different depending on how fast that observer is going. This can be measured by synchronized atomic clocks, one on the ground and another flown in space. Time moves slower for the faster space object. At relatively slow speeds, like the difference between being on the Earth and being in orbit, that difference isn't humanly perceptible, but it is measurable. As you approach light speed, the effects becomes more and more pronounced. Once you reach the speed of light, time effectively stops for you as perceived by outside observers, but passes normally for everyone else, though locally, say in your spacecraft, you can't tell the difference. It's why time was all weird in the movie Interstellar. I suspect most people curious enough to be here already knew this, but thought it would be interesting enough for the thread just the same. On a related note, that mass also has an effect on time. The more mass something has, and therefore the more gravitational pull it has, the more it bends space-time like a bowling ball on fabric. The fabric is space-time. Supermassive objects like black holes, massive bowling balls, slow down time. This effect is known as gravitational time dilation. Not only do they slow down time around them, but they also cause light to bend around them in a phenomenon called gravitational lensing. We actually have images of these gravitational lens effects. It's wild. And yes, all those smears and dots are other galaxies. Turns out that if you point to a seemingly empty part of the night sky and take a photo of long enough duration, this is what you'll get. See the Hubble Deep Field. Time is a big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff, or so I've heard. Story 14. Let's set up a scenario for this one. Imagine you were to observe a two-dimensional dog on a flat plane. The dog, being a 2D creature, would only be able to perceive lines via its perception, but you, being a three-dimensional creature, can see the world around the dog in its entirety all at once. This would include its past at the beginning of the line and its future at the end. This would be the same for a 4D being observing us, where we can see the world around us using our perception. The 4D being would see the world around us as a sort of tube where our entire lives, past, present, and future, would be visible to it all at once. Within this framework, a form of time travel would be possible. If we could see in 4D space, we could peer into humanity's past and future. Story 15. If you live in California, your credit card debts go away with you. Not sure, but I imagine it might be different if you owe really big amounts. But if you owe a couple of thousand, no one will come after your relatives or estate for it. When my dad got to 90 years old, he removed my mom from all his credit card accounts for this reason. After he passed away, she didn't have to pay anything, and there were no collections. His biggest account had about $3,500 on it, so if you live here and you're getting on in years, be sure not to rack up any really big amounts and your survivors won't be bothered. Story 16. The science of quantum mechanics gives plenty of examples of this. Those have been verified thousands of times and are used on everyday objects from cell phones to GPS and cryptography, just a few. An elementary particle like the electron or the photon can be both a particle and a wave at the same time. A particle can be in two different places at the same time. It can even be in an infinity of places at the same time. It is so weird that some scientists simply don't want to think about it and just use the math, which works incredibly well. For others, this is not satisfying and they reach the conclusion that reality as we think about it does not even exist. Einstein called it spooky. I wish someone would start a discussion on reality, like what is it? Only a word with no physical correspondence? Something we will never understand because our brain is not powerful enough, an illusion? Feel free to add it to my list. Story 17. Chemicals in the water are making frogs gay. The man who said it tends to go off on wild tangents, or when he's being interviewed and doesn't have much time, he jumps right to the most outlandish part of his theory, so many people don't really listen to him. Plus, he's very conservative and a Trump supporter, so many people tend to discount everything he says as being untrue. It has been proven, however, that certain chemicals mimic estrogen. When they enter the water supply, frogs who are able to sense hormones in the water and change their biological gender to even out the ratio of males and females in a certain environment are tricked into believing the area is filled with females. They remain male and have intimacy with other male frogs, but no tadpoles are created because there are no eggs. In the end, the chemicals really did lead to same-gender behavior in frogs. Science has since proven that those same chemicals can have a detrimental effect on hormone production in humans, especially in children. Consequently, this chemical, often associated with BPA or astrazine, is now heavily regulated. However, Alex Jones took a great deal of heat for bringing it up years ago. Story 18. When you breathe in through your nose, one nostril breathes in the air faster than the other. And every few hours, the faster and slower nostrils switch which side is dominant. It's called the nasal cycle and is controlled by the autonomic nervous system. You can prove it to yourself. Breathe in through your nose very slowly while you pay close attention to the sensation. You can feel one nostril taking in the air faster than the other. Try it again every hour and you will be able to tell that it switched automatically at some point. Probably only works if you are not already congested. Story 19. Mazda has had two of the most oddly specific product recalls in automotive history. First, they had to recall a bunch of Mazda 6S's because spiders kept infesting the fuel lines. For whatever reason, this problem was limited to one model and only one generation of that model. Spiders don't mess with any other cars. Second, they had to recall a bunch of other cars because the infotainment system would break whenever users tried to listen to 94.9 KUOW radio in Seattle. It wasn't the wavelength. Stations on 94.9 in other cities were totally fine. This problem was specific to KUOW. Story 20. Found this out yesterday, but in 2011, a guy in Australia found what was essentially an infinite money hack on the ATMs, where he could press transfer and transfer as much money as he wanted between his accounts. It would say the transaction was canceled, but it wasn't canceled, and he got to spend millions of dollars for 4.5 months until his conscience got the best of him. He tried to turn himself in multiple times and even went on TV to tell people about what he was doing, stealing millions from the banks. Despite trying to turn himself in, it took quite a while for anyone to investigate him, and when they finally did, he only got 1 year in jail and only forced to pay back a fraction of the money he stole. Pretty cool story. And if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 21. One of the most absurd facts that sounds completely fake but is 100% true is that octopuses have 3 hearts and blue-red liquid. Here's how it works. Two of their hearts pump to the gills, while the third pumps it to the rest of the body. And get this, when they swim, the heart that pumps to the body actually stops beating, which is why octopuses prefer crawling to conserve energy. As if that's not wild enough, their red liquid is blue because it contains copper-based hemocyanin instead of the iron-based hemoglobin we have. Essentially, octopuses are nature's sci-fi alien species living right here on Earth. Story 22. Project Sundial was a proposed doomsday planet-ender weapon designed by Edward Teller. From what we know, it would have had a 10-gigaton blast, enough to essentially erase the North American Southwest instantly and contaminate virtually every corner of the Earth, rendering it uninhabitable. Teller's team was already working on it at Lawrence Livermore at the time he proposed it to others at the Atomic Energy Commission. Basically, everyone on record about it reported shock and horror at the idea of such a device. There was a test scheduled of the primary trigger for the device, codenamed Nomen, itself reportedly a very large explosive device, but it did not actually take place. What we don't know, literally anything else. Notably, how it would have worked or how far they got, it's still classified. Story 23. With our current understanding of astrophysics, we will never travel to the stars. They are just too far away, and there is no technology that even comes close to breaking the light barrier. There's also the fact that the universe is forever expanding exponentially. You cannot factor for infinity. There is 0 point in Musk's attempts to colonize Mars. If we can't control this planet, we are going to fail miserably with even more extreme ones. He's wasting money by tricking people into giving him what he wants with scary words. People point to the warp drive theory, but you would need a ship with an engine the size of the Sun or Jupiter. Both are insanely large tasks that we have no clue how to even start. Furthermore, if you are just creating a star inside the engine, isn't it going to move? The human body evolved to live on Earth. Once taken off of our planet, our bodies begin falling apart in multiple ways: hearing loss, bone loss, muscle loss, madness, radiation sickness, and the lack of Earth's frequencies. It's all bad. If humans want to travel to the stars, we had better learn how to use, well, magic, because the universe is a cold, uncaring place and we weren't meant for it. Story 24. Fortune cookies are an American invention. Likewise, donuts hail from Greece and churros are originally from China. Childbirth can make you go blind, lose your teeth, or even, and in at least one notable case, make you severely allergic to water. You're more likely to be terminated by a vending machine than a shark, and you're more likely to be terminated by a cow than a vending machine. In 1987, a man managed to drive 14 miles, terminate his mother-in-law, and attack his father-in-law, all while he was technically asleep. He was eventually acquitted after his brain activity during sleep was studied and found to be highly abnormal. The Byzantine Empire fell to the Ottoman Empire because someone forgot to lock one of the main gates to the city. Abraham Lincoln's son, Robert Todd Lincoln, was saved by another passenger after he fell off a train platform onto an active track. The man who saved him was none other than Edwin Booth, John Wilkes Booth's brother. Cleopatra, 69 to 30 BCE, lived closer to the opening of the first Pizza Hut, 1958 AD, than the completion of the Great Pyramid, roughly 2560 BCE. A book written in 1898 called Futility, or The Wreck of the Titan, predicted the events of the Titanic sinking with eerie accuracy, including the location, the month, and the ship's overall design and specs. Story 25. Donald Trump, a known 6-time bankrupted businessman and philanderer who had been accused of helping Russia launder money for years, has ties to the mob and notoriously does not pay his bills, charged the Secret Service to stay at his clubs and hotels, making millions in taxpayer money while in office. He once joked with Howard Stern on his talk show about how hot his daughter is. He was a friend of Jeffrey Epstein and appeared on his private plane, dubbed the Lolita Express, with his name on the flight logs multiple times, and he wished Epstein's girlfriend, who was helping Epstein find and take advantage of young girls, all the best while she was in jail. He has settled over a dozen cases out of court. Despite this, he became the 45th president of the United States and has now become the 47th. The man has broken just about every commandment and is as hateful as the sky is blue, yet he somehow has a Hulk Hogan-style chokehold on evangelical Christians. He is the wolf in sheep's clothing. He is the literal Antichrist. Jesus, take the wheel, I just cannot. Story 26. The reason people want to squeeze things that are super cute is that your brain wants to terminate it. When you look at things like babies, puppies, or kittens, the overwhelming feeling of cuteness confuses your brain. It sets off the same neurochemical responses that pain does, but without the actual sensation of pain, so your brain doesn't know how to process it. Basically, your brain says this thing is causing big feelings and those usually aren't good, so we must be threatened. Consequently, our brain triggers something similar to a fight or flight response and gives you an overwhelming urge to squeeze the thing because it wants to stop the threat so you won't feel those intense emotions anymore. Story 27. Edgar Allan Poe wrote a book called The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket, in which a group of men are stranded at sea. Faced with the threat of starvation, one of the men, named Richard Parker, suggested drawing straws to decide who would be eaten. He lost and was eaten. About 46 years or so later, on a ship called the Mignette, some sailors were stranded and facing starvation, so they decided to terminate a crew member and eat them. His name was Richard Parker. Another part of the story is there used to be a custom of the sea, which was basically if you were stranded and facing starvation, you could hold a lottery to decide who would be eaten. The crew on the Mignette didn't follow this and just chose a member, so they were actually prosecuted. Story 28. The London Bridge, the one that was built in the 1830s, was actually moved all the way to Arizona in 1971. The city of London sold it and it was moved brick by brick all the way to Lake Havasu City, Arizona, where it was reassembled. The guy who bought it wanted to turn Lake Havasu into a tourist destination, and he came up with the surprisingly brilliant idea to move the London Bridge into a city. Somehow it worked, and Lake Havasu City is a very big tourist spot in Arizona. You can drive on the original 1830s London Bridge today all the way on the other side of the planet. Story 29. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand happened after his assassin missed his mark initially. Another conspirator, Nedeljko Kabrinovich, was supposed to destroy the car Ferdinand was in with a grenade, but it bounced off the back and blew up the car behind him instead. After narrowly avoiding a fatal attack, Ferdinand and his wife Sophie were taken to the governor's residence for a short rest. The royal couple wanted to visit the people injured by the explosion at the hospital, but no one told the drivers to change the itinerary. Once the drivers realized the mistake, they had to turn around. As they did so, heading back into town, the car came to a standstill. Feeling defeated, the assassin, Gavrilo Princip, had stopped at a local cafe. By an incredible coincidence, the cafe he was at happened to be right across the street from where Ferdinand's car was stuck in traffic while trying to reverse. Princip saw the opportunity, walked up to the car, and shot both Ferdinand and his wife. About a month later, this event sparked the beginning of World War I. Story 30. The Pledge. If you set up an experiment where a coherent beam of light is blocked except for two slits and the light is displayed on a sheet on the far side of the two slits, you will see a line of alternating light and dark bands. This is caused by the wave nature of light, which interferes with itself as it emerges from the two slits, causing some parts of the beam to be reinforced and some to be suppressed. The turn. If you arrange to fire one photon at a time from your projector, you will see exactly the same pattern if your projection screen records where the photons impact. This is because the single photon interacts with itself as it goes through both slits at the same time. The photon behaves like a wave, passing through both slits simultaneously and then interfering with itself on the other side. This simple experiment shows the utterly unintuitive and strange nature of the quantum nature of reality. The Prestige. If you set up a detector on each slit such that the passage of a photon could be detected, the interference pattern goes away. The act of detecting that the photon has gone through one but not the other of the slits makes that actually true, and the quantum nature of reality is hidden again. The photon behaves like a particle and not a wave. The universe somehow knows you're inspecting it, and once it has determined it is being observed, it hides its true nature from the observer. Story 31. There is a common belief that you can't be racist towards white people. Somehow, people overthink the issue and claim that you can't be racist against them because historically they have held all the power. They write long papers about their research and findings, overcomplicating the simplicity of what racism is. Also, that they can be just as bigoted towards certain people based on the color of their skin and not have to accept that they are embracing the very hate they claim to be against. It isn't and has never been that complicated. If you dislike someone because their skin is too dark, too light, or just different from your own, you're racist. If you claim white people have been racist against you, so you dislike them because they are white, then you are doing exactly what those people did to you. They were racist and now you are too. If you go out of your way to mention someone is white when it isn't relevant and make it clear you have a problem with them because of something they couldn't control, congrats, you're not just a racist, you're an active racist. You call them names like colonizers or cave dwellers simply because of the color of their skin. You've not only embraced judging people, but you do it without fear, accountability, or embarrassment, and that's a scary level of racism. Story 32. Ooh, my time to shine. Founding Fathers Facts Time. Vice President Aaron Burr kept a diary. In it, he details several of his most idiotic decisions outside of terminating Hamilton. These include setting himself and his desk on fire while trying to light a candle with his gun twice. He also spent 40 pounds on a coconut. Also not in his diary, but true, he once tried to make himself Emperor of Mexico and annex it into the U.S. Jefferson put him on trial for it. It was called the Burr Conspiracy. George Washington once accidentally admitted to a crime because he sucked at French. He also hated making speeches and would play the drums with his silverware to avoid them. Thomas Jefferson, beyond his deplorable morals, was also hilarious. He once sent a moose to a French scientist to prove American animals were larger than European ones. He was gifted a wheel of cheese that weighed 1,235 pounds by some Northern Democratic Republican supporters and refused to share it with any Federalists, claiming it came from Democratic Republican cows. He introduced macaroni and cheese to the U.S. and invented the swivel chair. He also had a goat he kept on the White House lawn that was so ill-tempered it scared people. He refused to move it until it terminated a small boy. He was also very bad at public speaking. Washington was either good at it but hated it, or had others write his speeches and was good at delivering them. Baron Friedrich Wilhelm von Steuben was not actually a baron. He was a flamboyant gay man who avoided jail in Europe for his taste in men only because Benjamin Franklin looked at his military experience and decided the Continental Army needed help. It really did. Franklin decided he had the skills to whip them into shape. Von Steuben did so, and his Blue Book on military regulations remained in use until the 20th century. Presumably, his pantsless parties only happened once, though that party at Valley Forge was likely attended by Washington, Hamilton, and other officers. Alexander Hamilton published the Reynolds pamphlet detailing his affair with Maria Reynolds, which ruined his political career. Most people know this from the musical, but what they probably don't know is that it was 95 pages long. The man really would not shut up. Story 33. Earth's water is a biological desert. Comparatively speaking, it has been for millions of years. Between 80% and 85% of all biomass on Earth is found on land. This is due to the requirements of photosynthesis and substrates. You need both to create a massive amount of biomass. Almost no aquatic environments have a substrate close enough to the surface for photosynthesis to occur. Where aquatic photosynthesis is possible on a substrate, shoreline, shallow lakes, rivers, and estuaries, you do see an increase in biomass, think kelp forests and reefs. However, shorelines take up almost none of a water body's total area, so most aquatic substrates are dark. Kelp doesn't work in most aquatic environments because it can't get sunlight. Also, kelp isn't a plant, it's a form of brown algae, but I digress. It turns out that most of Earth's aquatic environment is deep ocean. There is basically no life there because the large plants or plant-like organisms that might grow there cannot get enough light. Some life exists by scavenging and some by chemosynthesis, but they are rare and have negligible biomass. On the other hand, almost all land has both sunlight and a substrate. Consequently, things almost always grow on land, and when conditions are right, which they usually are, you get a massive amount of growth. All that said, there's a further bit of trivia. The vast majority of Earth's biomass, again about 80 to 85%, is made of plants, but in the water, most of the biomass is animals. Earth's waters are mostly full of consumers, not producers. It wasn't always this way, however. Story 34. Almost everyone has herpes. These stats differ depending on which studies you look at, but roughly 50 to 80% of adults already have one of the herpes-type viruses in their bodies. It's a family of viruses that is extremely contagious through saliva and bodily fluids, making it almost impossible to avoid for a social species. Sharing drinks, borrowing a friend's toothbrush, using someone else's coffee mug without washing it properly, a kiss on the cheek from a family member, or even chewing on the same pen your mate used, it is nearly impossible to avoid. Mostly, it lies dormant in your system for life after the initial infection because the immune system keeps it in check. It remains inactive until a severely stressful event or disease triggers it into action, usually when the virus realizes the immune system has been compromised. That's why most people only have a few cold sores in their entire lives. Other people have weaker immune systems or illnesses, meaning their bodies can't fight it as well, and those poor souls get cold sores all the time. The herpes that the media often focuses on is HSV2, a recurring form of predominantly passed through intimate contact. While HSV2 is often associated with the private parts, it is important to know that HSV1, the cold sore virus, is now responsible for a huge number of cases due to oral intimacy. Protection can lower the risk, but it cannot 100% prevent transmission because the virus spreads through skin-to-skin contact, not just fluids. So don't panic if you've had cold sores, chicken pox, or shingles. Almost everyone on the planet carries a member of this viral family. Story 35. I broke both of my pinky toes on a train in Paris when I was 9. Two people were standing close to me and the train shook twice. First, an old man with a cane on my left smashed my left pinky toe with his heavy cane. Then a full-blown drag queen misstepped and crushed my right pinky toe with her giant hot pink high heel. They were massive. Only my mom and dad saw it happen. My mom covered her mouth with a shh motion, and my dad raised his eyebrows, pulling them close together while making an O shape with his mouth. My pinkies were sticking straight out, and I felt my face and neck get very hot from the pain, the embarrassment, and the pressure of having to hide it. I did make a painful sound with my mouth. The drag queen and hot pink said something, I think in French, and rolled her eyes, maybe unaware of what had happened. I don't even know. It had to have been the weirdest thing that ever happened in my life. I still ask my parents constantly if that really happened, and they say yes, but they tell me not to talk about it because it just sounds insane. I've told people and they laugh uncomfortably or tell me it's a fake memory, but it's not. I'm 19 now, so that was only like 10 years ago, and I remember that memory and the feeling of my toes breaking clearly. Maybe I didn't scream because I have Ehlers-Danlos and I've broken or dislocated many of my joints and bones, but it's still just insane to me. Story 36. The Spartans hated freedom even by the abysmal standards of ancient Greece. No society in history had a greater percentage of slaves that were also not superior individual fighters. Life under Sparta was so intolerable that they actually managed to produce a slave revolt with their trashy ideology in an economic environment where such things were unheard of, and abolitionism was effectively not even invented yet. Despite winning the Peloponnesian War, they lost it all to revolution because they were useless, obsolete conservatives who are incapable of adaptation. Zack Snyder and every right-winger is an illiterate who doesn't do research. When Sparta fell, the world gained. The myth of Sparta has been upheld throughout history by out-of-touch aristocrats who love subjugation. After learning about Greek history, in my opinion, every football team who calls themselves the Spartans is just slapping a trashy little rich boy label on themselves. Not the image I think they would like to evoke. That goes for military units as well. Story 37. Clint Eastwood was once in the Army and served as a lifeguard. Since he was in the Army, he was able to get free rides on military planes and took one to visit family during the holidays for a few days. The night he was meant to head back to his station again, there were no outgoing flights except for a single passenger plane. He begged the pilot for a ride. The back hatch of the plane where he was curled up opened up as they were going up, causing him to lose oxygen rapidly. At the same time, the pilot's oxygen was depleting for separate reasons. They were over the Californian Ocean and ended up crashing. It was late at night, so he and the pilot had to struggle through shark-infested waters without being able to see anything and somehow got separated because of the waves. They met back up hours later at a hospital when Eastwood found his way to a radio station near the water's edge. He and the pilot swam in the right direction by pure luck, and Eastwood was so cold and exhausted that, had he been swimming for much longer, it's likely he would have drowned. Story 38. The earliest known example of a person's name belonged to a record keeper or scribe. It's thought that human writing was invented because of the need to record transactions for later recall, and this resulted in a fairly rich set of contracts that could be recognizable even today. And of course, for an entire class of scribes to write and read the contracts. That man's name is thought to be Kushim, but judging from the extent of the writing, it's clear this sort of thing had already been going on for a long time. It's just the oldest name we know of. It's over 5,000 years old, but accounting itself has been around for over 7,000 years, at least. Kushim kept records of how much barley he was responsible for and how much had been discharged from his care. Story 39. The smallpox virus samples have not been destroyed. Since 1984, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in the United States and the State Research Center of Virology and Biotechnology Vector in Kolstovo, Russia, are the only two labs authorized by the WHO to hold stocks of live smallpox virus. In 1986, the WHO first recommended destruction of all smallpox samples and later set the date of destruction to be 30 December 1993. This was postponed to 30 June 1999, then again to 30 June 2002. Due to resistance from the US and Russia in 2002, the World Health Assembly agreed to permit temporary retention of the virus stocks for specific research purposes. A 2010 review by a team of public health experts appointed by the WHO concluded that no essential public health purpose is served by the American and Russian laboratories continuing to retain live virus stocks. The stocks still exist in 2021. And if any of these stories got to YouTube, here's more for us. YouTube thinks we're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.